what really scares them is that we're empowering white kids to better understand our society, the structures of racism, and how they could be part of a struggle that would not only free Black people, but free themselves.
Awesome. Jesse, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So last week we talked with a teacher organizer in Iowa City, along with Deborah from Zen Education Project. And we talked about the Teach Truth Day of Action that is happening today, June 10th. So if folks missed that conversation last week, definitely check it out. But Jesse, could you tell us what is the Teach Truth Day of Action that's happening today?
Yeah, it's an exciting day all across the country. Parents, students, teachers, community members, caregivers, mentors, counselors, everybody who cares about education and youth are rallying from my hometown here in Seattle down to Miami and everywhere in between. People are fed up with the attack on education, the attack on our youth, the attack on our teachers. You know, almost every state in this country and many local school districts have passed bills that try to require educators to lie to students about structural racism, to say that it wasn't foundational to the United States, right? Even though our nation was built on a genocide of Native people and the enslavement of Africans, there are laws that say you can't call that structural racism now. And these laws are now applied to almost half of public school students in the United States. And it's really a scary moment we're in. And that's why we're fighting back today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've seen that right here in Alabama. Thank goodness the worst bill that we had that was called Divisive Concepts Ban, which is about what it sounds like. It died on the last day of the legislative session this week, so we're very happy about that. But, you know, the sponsor of that bill actually said it was necessary because teachers were proselytizing and sexualizing children. And, you know, I think that's the sort of outrageous rhetoric that's been attached to this. So Jesse, tell us a little bit about your involvement. What have you been doing with this Teach Truth Day of Action, both locally and just in general?
Yeah, well, I've been a teacher my whole career from the time I was 20, and I have most recently taught at my alma mater, Garfield High School in Seattle. I'm now working with the Zen Education Project, and we provide free downloadable people's history lessons to educators in every state. We have over 150,000 educators who have registered at our website, and these are educators that want to teach beyond the textbook, that know that the corporate textbooks that exist in this country far too often erase the contributions of Black people, people of color, of women, of LGBTQ people. And we want to center those voices that have been marginalized. And so we have lessons to teach about every social movement we can, and really help students understand the power that youth have played in social movements throughout history so that they can be part of the struggles today for a more just society. And I've helped both at the local level and the national level planning for this day of action. And I think today will be the largest one yet. You know, we had the first one in 2021, right as these bills were first being rolled out across the country. And so this is our third annual hashtag Teach Truth Day of Action. You can go to the zeneducationproject.org and find out where the rallies are in your city and your location, and go join it today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, I mentioned to you off air that I've been following your work for years, really since I was a student teacher, I think. And I first read about some of the stuff y'all were doing up in Seattle with the SEE, and your Reform Caucus up there, and longtime fan of Rethinking Schools and Zen Education Project. So really, to me, it seems fitting that you would be involved in this. It seems to kind of fit right in with your career. So, could you talk a little bit more just about like your journey in the movement? What led you up to this point?
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that. I'm really pleased to hear that my work's having that impact. And, I started teaching in Washington, D.C., and I think the fifth and sixth graders that I taught in D.C. really were teaching me. They were teaching me about the inequities in our society that has really propelled me to spend my life trying to transform the education system and the broader social structures that are creating such abhorrent inequality. I taught at a school in Southeast DC, so I would drive by the White House, cross the Anacostia River, and be in a neighborhood that has been completely forsaken by anyone with power or money. It was a school that was 100% segregated, all Black children. And really the only services these children got, if you can call it services, was the police, who would roam the halls with impunity. I saw a police officer jack a fourth grader up against the wall, screaming in his face for throwing paper. I had a hole in the ceiling of my classroom that I discovered when it rained. And the first project I ever assigned these students was to research somebody that they admired from history that had helped to create a better world and make a poster board. And we were set to present those posters on Monday, and we came in after the weekend, and there was a half-inch standing water on the ground, and the posters were all destroyed. And I had to put an industrial-sized garbage can under that hole, and there it stood for 3 years, collecting water. And, I began teaching in 2001, so it was the same year of the 9/11 attacks. And so we actually saw the smoke rising from the Pentagon from my classroom window. And it was a terrifying day, but I got to tell you, what's even more terrifying was seeing the U.S. mobilize untold fortune to go bomb people halfway across the world, but couldn't fix the hole in the ceiling of my classroom. And that experience, I think, really led me to question the priorities of our country and to organize collectively with my colleagues to help create a more just education system.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Absolutely. And something I wanted to ask about because I've been a rank and file teacher. I've been a field staffer for the Education Association representing teachers. And now I'm just an ally. I'm a public school parent. But my wife is a teacher. She's still in the classroom. Of course, teachers are always going to be near and dear to my heart. So I guess the thing that I'm most curious about is your thoughts when it comes to rank and file educators themselves organizing, and maybe what is so important about that, particularly in this moment of attacks that we're seeing politically on the content that happens in our classrooms, the professions of the people teaching in the classrooms, the funding and the resources of the classrooms. So we're seeing these attacks from multiple directions. And I was just wondering if you could talk more about why is it important that educators themselves are organizing and getting active and involved in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think educator unions are crucial to the well-being of education and the working class in general. And that's why they're so vilified by billionaires and the think tanks that they fund. If people want to do a deep dive on the history of educator unions in struggles for social justice, people should check out the book that I co-edited called Teachers, Unions, and Social Justice. And in the book, we really tell the story of the countless struggles throughout U.S. history and the growing movement today among rank and file educators to organize to fully fund education in the world's richest country, we shouldn't have holes in the ceiling that just allow the elements to destroy our kids' projects, right? But this is a common theme in American public schools, and the main obstacle to the destruction of public schools, to the gutting of the funding, is the teachers' unions. And I think that there's work to be done to reinforce those unions, to make them more robust, to make them more oriented towards struggles for social justice. But without them, we're really just throwing our children to the wolves, the billionaires who see dollar signs where they should see children. And that's what the whole privatization movement around vouchers and charters is about, where they want to gut the funding from the public schools and put them into unaccountable private hands. And the teachers' unions are crucial to standing up against that, and that's why they've been vilified. And I'll just reinforce how important they are today. While they're trying to outlaw the truth in education, they are trying to ban Black history. In Florida, they did ban the AP African American Studies class. In Florida, it's now a felony if you get caught with the wrong book in your classroom. Literally, it's a 5-year jail sentence and a $5,000 fine if a teacher gets caught with a book helping students understand racism or gender or transphobia, right? And we need organizations to help teachers collectively fight for the rights of teachers to teach students about their own culture and history and identities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the thing that I really want to see the teachers' unions step up and really live up to the responsibilities there, because as important as it is to, lobby for pay raises and lobby for better health insurance, negotiate for that, in some states. But here, typically you're lobbying in Alabama. We don't have collective bargaining agreements for our teachers. But we do still have organizations of teachers. And I think it's important that they not avoid these difficult conversations. And I think that's what I've observed in the South, is that there is a reluctance to have these conversations for fear of brushing up against, Republican power, or perhaps alienating white teachers who may be more conservative politically. And I think that is a real mistake to do that. I think it's important that our unions be really engaged and vocal when it comes to matters of justice. And I think, as you illustrated, right, it's impacting teachers' ability to do their job. They're risking a felony to do right by their kids, and if our unions aren't involved in that, I don't know what they're going to be involved with. So I really appreciate your leadership.
No, thank you, man. And I'm heartened that today's action has been robustly supported by the NEA and the AFT. And I think it's a really great sign that we are entering an era where everybody knows that basic forms of democracy are under assault when teachers can't teach that slavery happened. And I'm not exaggerating here. I mean, I talked to a teacher named Greg Wickenkamp from Iowa, and Greg was teaching the book Stamped, the young adult version that gives the history of racist ideas. And he was attacked by a state legislator for teaching the truth that structural racism has existed in this country and was tied to slavery. And when he faced that attack, he contacted his superintendent, right? He wanted to know if the school district would support him in teaching about slavery. And people should go Google this video. It's breathtaking to watch his conversation with the superintendent, where he asked the superintendent point blank, can I teach that slavery is wrong? And the superintendent saying, no, that's an opinion. And when we've reached a point in this country where the attack on anti-racist education is so intense that the superintendent of a school system can tell you that you can't teach that slavery is wrong, you know we are rapidly descending into a very scary situation that more closely resembles McCarthyism.
That's exactly what was on my mind, that this is the Red Scare, just a revival of the Red Scare. Maybe they're using some different terms now, but that's exactly what this is about.
That's it. Yep. I mean, we need to look to history to understand the moment we're in, right? I mean, the Red Scare, where all they had to do was call you a communist to get you fired or blacklisted, is so important to understand right now, because all they have to do now is call you a critical race theorist, right? And push you out of the classroom. And during the late 40s and 50s, thousands of teachers were fired all over the country who just wanted to teach about the labor movement or about the struggle for racial justice, and were labeled communists and pushed out of the classroom. There were over 400 teachers in New York City alone fired during the Red Scare. And people should also know that the Red Scare had an overlapping Lavender Scare, which was the attack on LGBTQ plus people, and that was especially vicious on queer educators. And Florida in the 50s had the Johns Committee, which investigated teachers prying into their personal lives to find out who was a homosexual, and then firing scores of teachers and revoking their teaching certificates. And this is the exact strategy that they're reviving today in Florida and in states all across the country, where they're attacking what they call gender ideology and critical race theory. And it's really scary, the impact that it's having on our educators and on our most marginalized students. And we need to learn this history. Educators need to learn the history of access to literacy in this country to understand the attack on anti-racist education today, right? Because, my ancestors were enslaved, and it was illegal for them to be literate, right? It was the 1739 Stono Rebellion in South Carolina occurred, led by a man named Jemmy. He was an enslaved man who marched with a banner that read liberty, and they picked up more and more enslaved African people who fought back against their captivity. And when they were captured and killed, the South Carolina authorities didn't just want to murder their bodies, they wanted to murder the ability of any enslaved person to ever write that word liberty again. And so in 1740, the first anti-literacy laws were passed, making it a crime to be literate if you were Black. And those spread across the country, so that most of the South had severe penalties for learning to read or write if you were Black, and, including death. And, we can see a link from the attacks on Black literacy during the period of enslavement, the white supremacist movement during Reconstruction that burnt down over 600 Black schools, the attack on the freedom schools during the civil rights movement, and today's attack on anti-racist education.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you connecting those dots there and bringing that history together, because I couldn't agree more. It's so critical that the rank and file educators know this history and know these struggles and how they are connected, and put it in context. And I think that's why it is so important that educators are having these conversations, and why, Zen Education Project doing this Teach Truth Day of Action is huge. And I'm really pleased to hear more support from, the more official labor corners with NEA and AFT. And I think that's really important, that they recognize these threats for what they are, and the ways in which they threaten the membership, but not just the membership, but the communities as a whole. So, Jesse, I really appreciate your leadership. I appreciate all you're doing. Was there anything else you wanted to share with us this morning?
Well, I guess I just end by saying that this idea that social justice educators got into teaching because they want to shame white kids is absolutely absurd. That's the main talking point of the right wing. And they say that critical race theory, which they use to label any kind of teaching that opposes racism, they say that that's just a trick to label and shame white children. And as an anti-racist educator my whole life, my goal has been actually to empower white children to see that they can be part of struggles for social justice. And those anti-racist struggles have been hidden from white children as well. They're often missing from the textbook the examples of multiracial solidarity in struggles for everybody's liberation. And we want white children to learn about the Grimke sisters who fought against slavery, John Brown, who gave his life to fight against slavery. We want them to learn about Howard Zinn, who was really active in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, supporting Black students in the struggle to desegregate the South. We want them to understand that there's an important place for them to be in the struggles today for Black lives. And that's what really scares the right. They know that we're not shaming white kids, but what really scares them is that we're empowering white kids to better understand our society, the structures of racism, and how they could be part of a struggle that would not only free Black people, but free themselves. Because we know when all the world's resources are being used to oppress people, they're being siphoned out of the public schools, and that's hurting white kids who go to public schools as well. And so that the potential for that multiracial solidarity was on display in the 2020 uprising all across the country, which was the largest uprising in U.S. history, and it included people of all colors. And that's what terrified the right wing, seeing that kind of solidarity and the building racial consciousness that existed. And that's what we're experiencing now, is a vicious backlash to try to outlaw the discussion of how we build a better society. And we aren't going to quit. I made a promise to my ancestors that, I would not ever lie to children about enslavement, structural racism, regardless of the consequences. They can threaten us with jail. They can threaten us with fines, but we know that the truth is on our side, and we won't lie to children.
Amen, brother. Amen. They fear the interracial people power that we can build to build a better world. And I think you're exactly right. So, Jesse, thanks again for joining us. Best of luck with your day of action today in Seattle. Really wishing you all the best up there, and I hope it's a big success across the country.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too. All right, y'all. Search #TeachTruth Day of Action. You can find out more about what's happening across the country. I believe there is an event happening in Montgomery. I'm not sure if there's anything happening more like in Nashville or Chattanooga area. I haven't checked the map in a few days, but definitely check out Zen Education Project, and definitely follow Jesse Hagopian. He's definitely an OG in the education movement. Big fan of his work. So appreciate Zen Education Project for what they're doing. Big fan of their lessons, big fan of the resources they provide, because as he said, it's to teach outside the textbook. It's to teach people's history, and really to empower young people. And that's scary for some folks in charge. When we start talking about empowering young people and bridging racial divides and bridging other cultural divides and start uniting folks in interracial solidarity. That's a scary thing for folks in power. But that's all the more reason for us to keep it up.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.